After riding it for all of last season and this season, it's time to give the Rocky Mountain Fusion a proper long-term review. This bike's at an interesting price point. At just over $1,000, it's right in the mid-range as far as mountain bikes go. To some people, it's an unobtainable dream bike, and to some people, it's an entry-level mountain bike that's only good for casual mountain bikers. In my opinion, though, this is probably the best bike you can get for the dollar these days. Rocky Mountain specifically is a Canadian company. They're from British Columbia. Their bikes are really well tested and engineered. I find they ride really nicely, and they all have a great aesthetic to them. Let's start with the frame. The Fusion and the Soul are their entry-level bikes, kind of the trail or casual mountain bike price points. They're aluminum frames, but they're built up to be really tough. They've got the tapered head tubes, they've got really good geometry for hard trail riding, and they're beefy where they need to be beefy. The drivetrain on this bike is a little bit outdated technically, but considering my last bike was a 3x9 setup, this is pretty good. The Derailleur is the 10-speed version of SLX, and it doesn't have a clutch, but it still works pretty well, and I never really have issues with my chain dropping. And shifts nice and crisp even after 2 seasons of use. Like most mountain bikers these days, I don't really use the front derailleur. It mostly acts as a chain guide because I don't have a narrow wide system. What I did end up having to change out was the crank. This bike came with a Suntour crank, and it had this weird kind of hex-shaped interface for the non-drive side with like a wave washer system. And it started creaking really quickly. Still worked fine, but like the creaking noise was annoying. So I bought this just to stop that noise. The Derailleur crank actually works really good. It's nice and stiff. The gearing is basically the same as before, so the bike works great with this. The brakes are Shimano's last generation of entry-level hydraulics, and I really like these ones. They might not have quite the same kind of power as the higher levels or the modern hydraulics, but they're nice and reliable, they're easy to service, and the pads and rotors are super cheap to replace. I think these are the M425 levers and then the M365 calipers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, these things get my seal of approval. The suspension on this bike is relatively basic. It's RockShox XC30. There's no air chamber, there's not many adjustments on it, but it's nice and solid and it doesn't feel sticky at all, even after 2 seasons. If I was doing anything more hardcore than what I actually do, I would probably want something with an air chamber or maybe thicker stanchions, but for what I do, this is great. My only complaint about the fork is that up there is not actually a tapered steerer tube. That's a straight 1 1/8 steerer tube in the tapered frame with reducers in the headset. Works fine, but it would be cool to know there was a proper tapered fork in there. The tires I'm running on this bike are nothing fancy, but this bike is, it's a 29er, it's set up for cross country. So right out of the box it had relatively slick tires. I put these on so I have a bit more grip in muddy conditions, so I ride this thing in the snow and the mud from time to time. They're not the greatest tires in the world, but they do fine. Kenda Nevigals have been around for a while. If you find a pair, they might be worth picking up. Last, we're going to look at the contact points in the cockpit on this bike. You can see I'm running the stem flipped upside down. I'm also running a different bar from the original setup. I played around with this a little bit, and this is the best position I can find. It fits me really well. The original bar was a bit too straight, and it put my wrists in a weird position, but this bar from Spank does really nicely. The position's great, it makes the bike feel nice and aggressive, and they're still comfortable at the same time. This isn't the VibraCore model, it's the more basic Spank Uzi bar, but really good bar. The grips? These are the only grips I would ever run on a mountain bike. Ever since I tried them, nothing else. These are the best. These are DMR Death grips. Trust me, you want a pair of these. In the thick soft option. These are amazing grips. The bike came with a Wilderness Trail bike saddle, and it was fine, relatively comfortable. A bit skinny for some people, I think, but it fit me okay. After a while though, the seat started creaking and one of the rails actually started coming loose from the saddle itself. So I switched it out for this old used Physique saddle. This one's alright, but I got it for free, so it's good enough. As for the pedals, I'm running the Crank Brothers Stamp 1s. These are the nylon plastic version of the Stamps with a massive body. They're super low profile, but they still have tons of grip, and no matter where your foot is on the pedal, you're not slipping off of that. These inspire a ton of confidence. So now we're going to go over to CyclePath, take a look at the 2019 version of this bike, see if they've improved some things, see what they've changed up, see what they've made for the modern version. Let's see if I can do a cool transition here. So So we don't have the 2019 version of the exact same model in stock right now. That would be the Fusion 40. The one we have in stock right now is the Fusion 30, so one price point down. This one's actually pretty comparable and it has some benefits. I'm going to point them out. The drivetrain on this bike is the 9-speed Altus system, but unlike the system on my bike, this has the more modern 1x drivetrain. So it's got a much wider range of gears and it's way simplified. So great system right here. They've also used different cranks which aren't going to have the same problem as the Suntour cranks on my bike because the design on these is much more like Shimano's system, much more simplified compared to the other ones. In terms of the cockpit, they've improved a lot for this year. The bar has a bunch of rise to it now and some better angles, so that's going to be a lot more comfortable, and the brakes are the more updated design from Shimano, which are going to be a lot more powerful. As for the suspension, yeah, it might not be a RockShox fork, but unlike the one I was looking at earlier, it has adjustments. It has a rebound adjustment, it has the damping or the lockout up top, it has the air chamber, it's got everything you need. It's got nice thick stanchions too, so it's going to be plenty stiff. The new model has Maxxis Ardents, which are a lot more aggressive than the tires on my bike. I think that one had Maxxis Icons, which, you know, they're nice tires, but they're a bit too XC for the stuff I do. I gotta say, I'm also into this year's graphics. The blue and orange combination looks amazing. The blue and black on my bike's a bit too understated. I like this kind of flash they've added to it. So this bike gets my seal of approval. And keep in mind, this Fusion 30 is just under $1,000. So it's pretty accessible as far as mountain bikes go. You're getting a lot of bike for your money here. So no matter which Fusion you're looking at, if it's one of the modern generation of the Rocky Mountain Fusions, no matter which trim level, it's going to do great for you. These things are amazing.